Alright, now let's start looking at the 3D viewport closer. In this lecture, we'll go over the different types of shading for the 3D viewport and some options you have to customize it. Right now, the scene is being displayed in solid shaded view, which means that the objects are being rendered as solid and it gives the scene some basic lighting. This shading ignores any other lights you have and just uses a built-in lighting setup that you can actually customize in the user preferences. And I showed you how to customize the lighting before, but I'll show you again. You can go into the Edit menu, down to Preferences, and over to the Lights tab. Up here we have the Studio Lights, which is the built-in lighting. We can just expand the editor and then edit the studio light. And right here is the direction of the lighting, for example. We can move that around to change the direction of the light. And we can change the coloring and the other lights used as well. But I'm going to click on that to cancel it, and I'll close that out because I like the default lighting setup. It keeps all of the faces that are facing the camera or the view that you're in illuminated. So that's just a lot more convenient and functional for modeling. Now there's a couple different ways you can change the shading. The 4 shading options can be found as icons right up here. Right now we're set to solid shaded view. And another way to access the different shading modes is by pressing the Z key over the 3D view. This opens up a pie menu which has the 4 different shading modes. So now if we click on wireframe, then the objects are no longer solid. We instead can see all the edges that actually make up the models. Solid shading and wireframe modes are modes you'll be modeling in a lot. And a quick way to get into wireframe mode is if you're in any other mode, you can simply press Shift and Z and it'll switch over to wireframe mode. Then if you press Shift and Z again, it switches back to the mode you were in previously. Now whatever mode you're in, you'll have extra options in the top right viewport shading menu here. So in solid shaded view, we have different lighting options at the top here. So the studio lighting option right here is what uses the built-in lighting to shade your objects. Now like I mentioned, by default, this built-in lighting follows the view around so that any part of the objects facing you are always illuminated. Now if we click on this option right here called World Space Lighting, this actually locks the lighting in position so that it doesn't follow the view around. I find it's usually more useful to keep that disabled and use the built-in lighting that follows the view around. But if you do enable this option, you can also rotate the world by using the rotation option right here. But let me keep that disabled. Now you can also click this thumbnail right here for a collection of different studio lighting setups. And if you created your own studio lighting setup in the user preferences, then that option will appear in this menu here as well. Let me set it back to default. Now the next lighting option is called Matte Cap, and this will make every object reflect the chosen environment. When you click on the thumbnail here, you can see we have a whole collection of these to choose from, and you might want to use certain ones for different tasks. For example, this one here is especially good when sculpting. And if you want to zoom in to your surfaces and analyze them for any flaws, you might want to use one of these striped ones, or any of the really reflective matte caps like the red one here. Now back up in the menu, we also have a little icon here, and this option will just flip the matte cap from left to right, if that is useful to you at all. And there's also this gear icon here, which will show us the lighting preferences, and this is going to allow us to install our own custom matte caps if we want to. And I'm going to show you how to do that in extra content that'll be added in shortly after the course is published. But for now, let me close this, and let's go over the next type of lighting called flat. And as the name suggests, this will shade everything as a flat color, and you can define this color for each individual object in the material properties. So for example, if I select that building right there and we go over to materials, let me scroll down to the bottom to viewport display, and there's the color for it here. So let's change this to maybe a brown, and let me select the environment there, or the terrain I mean, and we'll make this a green. And there you go. Now if I go back up into the menu and I switch it back to Matte Cap or Studio, you can see that the viewport display color in the materials is affecting those lighting options as well. So each of those modes are affected by the viewport display color because we have the color down here set to material. If we switch this over to object, then the material viewport display color isn't affecting everything. Instead, the object colors will be affecting everything. Now let me show you where you can find the object colors. So we have the terrain selected. So I'll go over to the object properties here, and down here in viewport display, you can see we have a color option. So we can change that here. So now the object color is affecting this lighting option, but also the other ones as well. And that's pretty much the gist of what all these color options down here do. So I'm going to go through real quick and show you exactly how each one of them affects the lighting. Now, if your objects have any vertex paint that you'd like to visualize in the 3D view, you can use the vertex option here, and that will use the vertex paint as the coloring. And we can switch this to single, and we have the option here to change the color for everything in the scene. We can switch this to random, and that will give every object a random color, which can come in handy. And then we can set this to texture, which will display your image textures on your models in solid shaded view. So this can be really good for a quick preview of how your image textures look on your object. Make a note though that this will only display the image texture node that is selected. So for example, if I split the window here and head over to the shader editor, you can see we have 3 image textures here. The top one is the diffuse image texture, which is what's displaying right now because that's selected. But if we wanted to visualize the normal map image texture, I can click on this node, and now that's the one that's being displayed. Alright, so that does it for those options. Let me join these windows back together, and let's go back up in this menu here. Now let's go over the background options right here. Theme here, we'll use the background color set in the theme for the 3D viewport, which can be changed in the user preferences. World here, we'll use the world's viewport display color. So if I switch it to that, and we head over to the world properties here, down in the viewport display panel, we can switch the color for the background. And now the viewport background option here just lets you pick a color right here in the menu. And let me reset this back to theme now. Now one last note on these, both the color options here and the background options down here can be set differently for both solid shading and wireframe views. So for example, if I switch over to wireframe view, I can set the color options here to be random. And if I press Shift and Z to go back to solid shaded view, you can see the color options are still set to texture. And I can set them to material if I want, and it just saves the different settings between the different shading modes for you. Now let me reset things back to default real quick. Now let's move on to the miscellaneous options down here, and we'll start off with back face culling, which will only draw the front side of faces, not the back side. Every face has 2 sides, one side pointing outward and one side pointing inward. Take the terrain here for example. All the faces on the surface here are all pointing outward, and then if we go underneath here, all of these faces are pointing inward. Now these faces that are pointing inward aren't normally the ones that are being seen, so what we can do is turn on back face culling, and all the inside of the faces won't be drawn. They'll be invisible like that. And this can possibly be used to speed up viewport drawing or prevent certain faces from obstructing a view, or just to see if any faces are pointing the wrong direction. So let me turn that back off. And real quick before we move on, let me set this to single, just so everything has the same shading. I'm kind of sick of looking at the green. Now let's move on to X-ray, and this is actually a significant part of this lecture. We're going to change something with this to make it more like 2.79. So with the X-ray option enabled, it will make everything transparent based on this percentage here. Now the hotkey to toggle that on and off is Alt and Z, and that's an important hotkey to know because this mode does come in handy when you're modeling a lot, and there's also an icon for it up here to toggle it on and off. Now X-ray mode is actually extremely important for modeling in solid shaded view, which is something you'll be doing a lot. For example, if I select that building, press / on the numpad to go into local view, and let's zoom into these disks up here. And I'll press tab to go into edit mode. You can see when we're in X-ray mode, we can not only see the vertices on the surface of the object, but we can see the vertices behind the surface as well. If we press Alt and Z to disable X-ray, we can only see and select vertices that are on the surface. So let's say, for example, I wanted to move the bottom of this down. I'd have to select that vertex, swing around to the inside, and select that one as well. Then I can move both of these up or down. Whereas if I press Alt and Z for X-ray mode, I can select both of these without having to swing around to the backside. But also, having those vertices on the backside blocked often comes in handy as well when you just want to work with vertices on the surface and don't want to accidentally select some of the vertices in the back. So that's why it's important to remember the Alt and Z hotkey so you can easily toggle between them. I do have some complaints about this though. First off, it's mainly used for editing. So the fact that when an X-ray is enabled, if I get out of edit mode, the object itself is still transparent seems inconvenient in my opinion. And if I go back to global view by pressing / on the numpad, you can see this mode makes the entire scene half transparent, not just the object you're working on, which I think is unnecessary. So personally, I find it much more useful to leave X-ray enabled in solid shaded view, but crank the X-ray value up to 1. That way nothing is actually transparent. But if we select an object and go into edit mode, all of the wireframe and the edges and the vertices, they are all still transparent. I can still select through the surface as long as X-ray is still enabled. So that takes away any of the actual transparency of the object, but it leaves you the functionality in edit mode. And then you can still toggle X-ray on and off by pressing Alt and Z whenever you need to. Now, this is how things worked in 2.79 and older versions, which I think is a more functional default setting to have, since it'll be used more often like this than having all your models in your scene transparent. Plus, you actually still have that option just by going up into the menu here and adjusting the X-ray values whenever you need to. But as a default setting, I would definitely recommend keeping X-ray set to 1. Then you can just toggle it on and off using Alt and Z. And one last thing I want to note before moving on is that in wireframe view, we can actually set X-ray to be different than in solid shaded view. So let me press Shift and Z to go over to wireframe view. And let me press / on the numpad to isolate the building. Let's zoom into these disks up here again. Now in wireframe view, X-ray is enabled by default and set to 0 by default.